The town of Cedar Ridge looked peaceful from a distance. Tree-lined streets wound through carefully planned neighborhoods, manicured lawns stretched across entire blocks, and freshly painted fences gave visitors the impression that everything operated in perfect harmony. To outsiders, it seemed like the ideal American community, but residents knew a different reality. For years, the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association had gradually transformed from a neighborhood management group into something far more controlling. Rules multiplied every year, fines appeared without warning, complaints became weapons. And at the center of it all stood one woman who seemed to thrive on authority. Karen Whitmore had served on the HOA board for nearly a decade. What began as volunteer work had evolved into an obsession with power. She monitored properties constantly, documented minor violations, and treated every disagreement as a personal challenge. Many homeowners learned to avoid her entirely. Some crossed the street when they saw her approaching. Others kept their curtains closed whenever her SUV drove through the neighborhood. Nobody wanted attention from Karen Whitmore. Unfortunately for the people of Cedar Ridge, Karen believed she was untouchable. Her influence extended beyond the HOA. She had cultivated relationships with local officials, attended town council meetings regularly, and often inserted herself into matters that had nothing to do with neighborhood management. Over time, she became convinced that the town operated according to her expectations. That belief would soon collide with reality. Just outside the Cedar Ridge subdivision sat a family-owned gas station called Ridgeway Fuel and Market. The station had served the community for more than 30 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable. Residents stopped there every day. Travelers passing through town relied on it. Local workers grabbed coffee there before sunrise. The business had earned respect through consistency and honest service. A few months earlier, ownership had quietly changed hands. The previous owner retired and sold the property to a man named Marcus Reed. Marcus wasn't interested in drawing attention to himself. He focused on upgrading equipment, improving customer service, and fixing maintenance issues that had accumulated over the years. Most people simply viewed him as the new station owner. Few knew much about his background. Fewer still realized that Marcus had recently accepted another position in town, a position he had not yet publicly announced. Marcus preferred to let his actions speak for themselves. That decision would soon create one of the most talked-about incidents Cedar Ridge had ever seen. The trouble began on an unusually hot Friday afternoon. The station was busy. Several pumps were occupied. Customers moved in and out of the convenience store carrying drinks and snacks, while employees worked steadily behind the registers. Marcus spent most of the afternoon helping wherever needed. He checked inventory, assisted customers, and handled deliveries. Everything seemed normal until a luxury SUV pulled aggressively into the station. The vehicle immediately drew attention. Residents recognized it instantly. Karen Whitmore had arrived. Even from inside the store, employees could sense the change in atmosphere. People tended to become cautious whenever Karen appeared. Past experiences had taught them that simple interactions could escalate unexpectedly. Karen parked near a pump and exited her vehicle with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way. She surveyed the property with visible dissatisfaction. The newly renovated pumps, the updated signs, the fresh landscaping. Everything appeared to irritate her. Marcus noticed her arrival but continued helping customers. He treated her exactly the same as everyone else. That was his first mistake in Karen's eyes. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to special treatment. Local businesses often gave her discounts simply to avoid complaints. Some offered complimentary items. Others rushed to accommodate her demands before problems could develop. Karen viewed such treatment as normal. She considered it recognition of her importance. When she entered Ridgeway Fuel, she expected the same. Instead, she encountered something unfamiliar: boundaries. Marcus politely enforced station policies without exceptions. Prices remained the same for everyone. Promotions applied equally to all customers. No special privileges existed. For Karen, that was unacceptable. What should have been a routine purchase gradually evolved into a confrontation. Employees exchanged nervous glances as tension built. Customers lingered nearby, sensing drama. Several residents who recognized Karen quietly watched from a distance. Marcus remained calm throughout the encounter. His composure only seemed to frustrate Karen further. People accustomed to controlling situations often become angry when control slips away. Karen's frustration quickly transformed into determination. If she could not get what she wanted through pressure, she would find another way. Throughout Cedar Ridge, Karen had spent years leveraging authority whenever conflicts arose. Complaints, reports, investigations, official channels had become tools she used to win arguments. This situation would be no different. What she failed to realize was that Marcus Reed was not intimidated by titles, threats, or public displays of authority. He had spent most of his adult life dealing with difficult situations. Before purchasing the gas station, Marcus had built a distinguished career in law enforcement. He understood conflict. He understood intimidation tactics. Most importantly, he understood patience. Karen interpreted his calm demeanor as weakness. In reality, it was experience. As the afternoon progressed, more people noticed activity at the station. Several Cedar Ridge residents slowed their vehicles while passing by. Others remained parked nearby after finishing their purchases. Word spread quickly. Karen Whitmore was causing a scene again. Nobody knew exactly what had happened. Everyone wanted to see how it ended. Karen's reputation guaranteed an audience. The growing crowd only encouraged her behavior. She viewed public attention as leverage. The more witnesses present, the more pressure she believed she could apply. Marcus viewed the situation differently. Witnesses meant transparency. Transparency meant accountability, and accountability often revealed the truth. Neither realized just how significant those witnesses would become later. As temperatures climbed and frustration intensified, Karen made a decision that would alter everything. Rather than walking away, she escalated. Rather than accepting refusal, she sought enforcement. Rather than ending the dispute, she transformed it into an official matter. Within minutes, calls were made. Complaints were filed. Accusations began circulating. Several people overheard enough fragments to understand one thing. Karen intended to bring law enforcement into the situation. Many bystanders assumed the gas station owner would soon face trouble. After all, Karen usually got results when authorities became involved. That had been the pattern for years. But patterns have a way of breaking when people underestimate their opponents. As the first police vehicles began making their way toward Ridgeway Fuel, Karen stood confidently beside her SUV, convinced she was moments away from victory. Across the parking lot, Marcus watched the approaching vehicles with complete calm. The expression on his face puzzled everyone who noticed it. He looked neither concerned nor surprised. Instead, he seemed almost prepared. And as the flashing lights grew closer, nobody in the crowd could have imagined that the man standing beside the gas pumps was about to reveal a secret that would completely change the balance of power in Cedar Ridge. The arriving officers were about to discover that this ordinary-looking station owner was far more than he appeared, and Karen Whitmore was only minutes away from making the biggest mistake of her life. The flashing blue lights reflected across the gas station windows as two patrol vehicles rolled into the parking lot. The arrival immediately changed the atmosphere. Conversations stopped. Customers paused near their vehicles. Employees watched through the store's front windows. Even passing drivers slowed down to see what was happening. Karen Whitmore stood with the confidence of someone who believed the situation was already decided. For years, she had relied on the assumption that authority would naturally support her version of events. Whenever disputes arose, she positioned herself as the victim and expected officials to respond accordingly. In Cedar Ridge, that strategy had worked often enough that she no longer questioned it. The officers stepped out of their vehicles and surveyed the scene. Neither appeared alarmed. There was no emergency, no signs of violence, no damaged property. Only a crowd of curious witnesses gathered around a disagreement that had somehow escalated into a police matter. Karen immediately moved toward the officers. Her body language reflected complete certainty. She expected quick action. She expected validation. Most of all, she expected Marcus Reed to be placed in an uncomfortable position. The officers listened carefully as she launched into a lengthy explanation of the dispute. According to her version of events, she had been treated unfairly by a disrespectful business owner. She suggested that she had been singled out. She implied misconduct. She framed herself as a concerned citizen, attempting to protect community standards. The presentation was polished. Years of HOA politics had taught Karen how to present accusations in a convincing manner. Unfortunately for her, the officers had encountered similar situations before. Experienced law enforcement personnel rarely form conclusions based on a single account. They preferred facts, evidence, witnesses, context. As Karen continued speaking, several officers occasionally glanced toward Marcus. What they saw surprised them. The gas station owner appeared unusually relaxed. He showed no signs of anxiety, no visible frustration, no attempt to interrupt. He simply waited. That patience created a subtle contrast that many bystanders noticed immediately. The longer Karen spoke, the calmer Marcus appeared. The officers eventually turned their attention toward him. For a brief moment, the parking lot grew strangely quiet. People expected Marcus to defend himself. Instead, he calmly provided a concise summary of what had happened. No exaggeration, no emotional language, no personal attacks. Just a straightforward explanation of station policy and the events leading to the dispute. Several witnesses quietly nodded. Employees exchanged knowing glances. Customers who had observed portions of the confrontation appeared increasingly comfortable with Marcus's version of events. The officers began speaking with witnesses individually. That process slowly shifted the momentum. One customer described seeing Karen become angry after not receiving special treatment. Another explained that station policies had been applied equally to everyone present. Several witnesses confirmed that Marcus had remained professional throughout the incident. The consistency of their statements became difficult to ignore. Karen sensed the change immediately. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on her face. The situation was not progressing according to her expectations. Instead of instantly supporting her claims, the officers were conducting a proper investigation. That alone frustrated her. Years of influence had conditioned her to expect faster results. As witness interviews continued, one of the officers received a radio communication. The exchange was brief. A few simple words, yet the officer's expression changed noticeably afterward. He looked toward Marcus. Then he nodded slightly. Marcus returned the gesture. The interaction lasted only seconds, but several people noticed it. Karen noticed it too. A feeling of discomfort began growing in the back of her mind. Something wasn't right. The pieces no longer fit the outcome she expected. Meanwhile, rumors quietly spread through the crowd. Some residents recognized Marcus from somewhere but couldn't place him. Others remembered hearing whispers about upcoming changes within the police department. For months, Cedar Ridge had been preparing for a leadership transition. The previous police chief had retired unexpectedly after nearly 2 decades of service. Town officials had conducted an extensive search for a replacement. Candidates from multiple jurisdictions had been considered. The selection process remained largely confidential. Most residents knew a new chief had been hired. Almost nobody knew who it was. Town leadership planned to make the official announcement the following week. That schedule now seemed irrelevant. The truth was standing beside a gas pump. Karen remained unaware. She continued focusing on the dispute itself. She still believed she could regain control. She doubled down on her accusations. She emphasized her position within the community. She referenced her years of service to the HOA. She highlighted her relationships with local officials. Every statement seemed designed to reinforce her authority. Yet with each passing minute, the effect weakened. The officers remained professional but increasingly distant. The crowd became less sympathetic. Witness testimony continued supporting Marcus's account. Reality was slowly dismantling the narrative Karen had constructed. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the senior officers approached Marcus and extended his hand. The gesture itself seemed ordinary. The words that followed were not. The officer formally addressed Marcus by his official title. The title carried across the parking lot. Conversations stopped instantly. Heads turned. Expressions changed. For a brief second, silence settled over the entire gas station. Karen froze. Several witnesses looked confused. Others appeared shocked. A few people immediately understood what they had just heard. The new police chief. Marcus Reed was the new police chief. The realization spread through the crowd like electricity. Employees stared in disbelief. Customers exchanged stunned looks. Even some residents who thought they recognized him suddenly connected the dots. The secret was no longer a secret. Karen's face lost color. The confidence she had displayed all afternoon seemed to disappear at once. The implications hit her rapidly. She had spent hours attempting to pressure, intimidate, and publicly embarrass the very person who would soon lead the town's police department. The authority she believed would support her was standing on the opposite side of the dispute. More importantly, that authority had witnessed her behavior firsthand. The irony was impossible to ignore. Karen had called the police hoping to gain leverage. Instead, she had created an audience for her own downfall. Yet Marcus showed no sign of satisfaction, no smirk, no celebration, no attempt to humiliate her. His reaction remained remarkably professional. That professionalism impressed many of the witnesses. People expected revenge. They expected public embarrassment. Instead, Marcus focused entirely on facts. The dispute was evaluated objectively. Witness statements were reviewed. Station policies were confirmed. No misconduct occurred. No violations were found. The matter was effectively resolved. Karen's complaint collapsed under scrutiny, but the consequences extended beyond the gas station. As news spread through Cedar Ridge that evening, residents began discussing the incident extensively. Social media pages filled with speculation. Neighborhood forums exploded with comments. People who had endured years of HOA pressure suddenly found themselves revisiting old experiences. Stories emerged. Patterns became visible. Questions surfaced. Many residents began asking why one board member seemed to wield so much influence. Others wondered whether similar complaints had ever been investigated properly. The gas station incident became more than a simple argument. It became a catalyst. For the first time in years, Karen's authority appeared vulnerable, and vulnerability often attracts scrutiny. Marcus understood this better than anyone. As the crowd gradually dispersed and police vehicles departed, he remained thoughtful. The confrontation itself no longer mattered. What interested him were the reactions, the stories, the concerns quietly shared by residents after learning his identity. Over the course of a single afternoon, dozens of people had approached him. Many expressed relief. Others expressed frustration. Several hinted at problems extending far beyond HOA disputes. The patterns concerned him deeply. By the time sunset settled over Cedar Ridge, Marcus realized the gas station incident had revealed something unexpected. The town wasn't struggling with one difficult board member. It might be struggling with something much larger. And during the following week, a series of discoveries would convince him that Karen Whitmore's behavior at the gas station was only the beginning. Hidden beneath years of complaints, fines, and intimidation was a network of misconduct that threatened to expose some of the most powerful people in Cedar Ridge. And Marcus Reed was about to find himself at the center of an investigation nobody saw coming. The gas station incident became the defining topic of conversation throughout Cedar Ridge. Within days, nearly everyone had heard some version of the story. Some accounts exaggerated details. Others focused on Karen Whitmore's public embarrassment. But beneath the gossip and speculation, something more significant was happening. Residents were beginning to speak openly. For years, many homeowners had remained silent. Some feared retaliation from the HOA. Others believed complaints would accomplish nothing. A few simply wanted to avoid conflict. The revelation that the new police chief had personally witnessed Karen's behavior changed that calculation. People who had remained quiet suddenly felt comfortable sharing their experiences. Emails began arriving at the police department. Letters appeared in municipal offices. Town council members received calls from frustrated residents. Stories emerged from every corner of Cedar Ridge. At first, the complaints seemed unrelated. Excessive fines, questionable violation notices, selective enforcement, suspicious contractor agreements, disputes over community funds. However, as investigators reviewed the information, patterns slowly began to emerge. Marcus Reed approached the situation carefully. He understood the difference between community frustration and actual misconduct. Not every complaint represented wrongdoing. Not every accusation could be substantiated. His goal wasn't to target Karen or the HOA. His goal was to determine whether any laws had been violated. That distinction mattered. Professional investigations required facts, not emotions. Evidence, not rumors. Still, the volume of complaints continued growing. By the second week after the gas station incident, dozens of residents had submitted documentation. Some provided photographs, others shared emails. Several homeowners produced years of records they had carefully saved. Many of those records contained surprising details. One homeowner presented documentation showing repeated fines for violations that neighboring properties committed without consequence. Another revealed maintenance charges that appeared significantly higher than market rates. Several residents questioned how certain vendors consistently received HOA contracts despite charging substantially more than competitors. Individually, none of these issues proved criminal activity. Collectively, they raised concerns. Marcus began coordinating with town attorneys and financial auditors. The objective remained simple: review the facts, follow the money, determine whether further investigation was necessary. Karen remained largely unaware of how much attention was building around the HOA. She assumed the controversy would fade. After all, previous complaints had never gained significant traction. People vented frustrations. Nothing changed. That had been the pattern for years. This time was different. The presence of an experienced law enforcement professional altered the equation. Marcus possessed a unique advantage. Unlike many local officials, he had no history with Cedar Ridge politics. He owed favors to nobody. He had no personal alliances, no old rivalries, no hidden obligations. That independence made him difficult to influence. For people accustomed to operating within established power structures, independent oversight represented a serious threat. As auditors examined financial records, additional questions surfaced. Several HOA expenditures appeared unusual. Certain payments lacked sufficient documentation. Some contracts had been renewed repeatedly without competitive bidding. Other transactions seemed unnecessarily complicated. None of the findings immediately proved misconduct, yet each discovery justified closer examination. The deeper investigators looked, the more inconsistencies they found. Meanwhile, Karen focused on damage control. She attended HOA meetings with renewed determination. She attempted to reassure supporters. She framed recent criticism as personal attacks from disgruntled residents. She insisted that everything had been handled appropriately. Unfortunately for her, confidence alone could not erase records. Documents existed. Financial trails existed. Witnesses existed. The truth often leaves traces. Those traces were becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. As public interest grew, attendance at HOA meetings surged. Residents who had never participated before suddenly appeared. Questions became more frequent. Financial transparency became a recurring topic. Requests for records increased dramatically. Board meetings that once lasted 30 minutes stretched into several hours. Karen found herself facing scrutiny she had rarely experienced before. The shift frustrated her. For years, authority had flowed in one direction. The HOA issued decisions. Residents complied. Now residents were demanding answers. Karen viewed that change as a threat. Marcus viewed it as accountability. One evening, a breakthrough occurred. A financial auditor reviewing historical records discovered something unusual involving a landscaping contract. At first glance, the transaction appeared ordinary. The HOA had hired a landscaping company to maintain common areas. Such arrangements were routine. However, further examination revealed pricing discrepancies. The company charged significantly above industry standards. Additional review uncovered a troubling detail. The landscaping business was connected to a relative of one of the HOA board members. The relationship had never been disclosed. That discovery triggered broader investigation. Other contracts were reviewed. Additional connections emerged. Patterns became increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Each revelation added pressure. Town officials recognized the seriousness of the situation. What began as neighborhood complaints was evolving into something much larger. Media interest followed shortly afterward. Local reporters started attending meetings. News articles appeared online. Public attention expanded beyond Cedar Ridge. The story was no longer confined to a single neighborhood. It was becoming a town-wide issue. Karen's reputation suffered accordingly. Residents who once supported her began distancing themselves. Some board members quietly resigned. Others attempted to separate themselves from controversial decisions. The solidarity that once protected the HOA leadership started crumbling. Pressure reveals character. It also reveals loyalty. Many individuals who seemed united during times of power became surprisingly independent during times of scrutiny. Marcus observed the changes carefully. His focus remained professional. He understood that investigations must proceed methodically. Rushing conclusions could jeopardize legitimate findings. Patience remained essential. Still, the evidence continued accumulating. Then came another significant development. A former HOA administrative employee contacted investigators. The individual had left the organization several years earlier. Until now, they had remained silent. Recent events changed their perspective. The former employee provided information regarding internal practices. Some allegations involved selective enforcement, others involved document handling procedures. Several claims pointed investigators toward records that had previously escaped attention. The information proved valuable, very valuable. New documents were located. Additional timelines were established. Connections between various decisions became clearer. For the first time, investigators could see how multiple issues potentially related to one another. The picture forming was troubling. While not every allegation proved accurate, enough evidence existed to justify formal action. Town officials authorized a comprehensive review of HOA operations. The decision sent shockwaves through Cedar Ridge. Residents celebrated. Critics demanded accountability. Supporters argued that the HOA was being unfairly targeted. Debate intensified. The community became divided. At the center of everything stood Karen Whitmore. Only weeks earlier, she had arrived at a gas station expecting free gasoline and unquestioned compliance. Now she faced investigations, public criticism, and increasing pressure from every direction. The contrast was remarkable. Yet the most significant revelation had not occurred yet. As investigators reviewed newly discovered records, they uncovered evidence suggesting that certain documents may have been intentionally altered. If confirmed, the implications would be serious. Far more serious than excessive fines or questionable contracts. Document alteration crossed a line. It introduced potential legal consequences. The discovery immediately elevated the investigation. What began as concerns about HOA management was approaching criminal territory. Marcus understood exactly what that meant. Standards would become stricter. Evidence requirements would increase. Every finding would face intense scrutiny. The process would become more complicated, but it would also become more important. Late one evening, after reviewing a fresh batch of documents, Marcus sat quietly in his office, studying a series of records spread across his desk. The dates matched. The signatures matched. The financial transactions matched. For the first time, multiple pieces of the puzzle connected perfectly. A clear pattern emerged, and that pattern pointed directly toward individuals who had spent years believing nobody would ever look closely at their actions. Outside, the town remained unaware of what investigators had just discovered. Residents knew an investigation was underway. They knew questions were being asked. They had no idea how close authorities were to uncovering the full truth. Marcus looked out the window toward the quiet streets of Cedar Ridge. The coming weeks would change the community forever. The evidence now in front of him had the potential to expose years of misconduct, reshape local leadership, and bring powerful people face to face with consequences they never expected. And the final stage of the investigation was about to begin. The final stage of the investigation began quietly. There were no dramatic announcements, no flashing headlines, no public confrontations. Instead, a team of auditors, attorneys, investigators, and municipal officials spent weeks reviewing every relevant document connected to the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. The process was meticulous. Every invoice was examined. Every contract was analyzed. Every financial transfer was traced. Every allegation was compared against available evidence. Marcus Reed insisted on one principle above all others. The conclusions had to be undeniable. Years of frustration had created strong emotions throughout the community, but emotions alone could not support legal action. Facts had to lead the process. Fortunately, the facts were becoming increasingly clear. The altered documents discovered during the previous phase of the investigation opened the door to a much broader review. As experts examined those records, they uncovered additional irregularities. Several signatures appeared inconsistent with original filings. Certain approval forms had been modified after official votes. Some expense reports contained numbers that no longer matched bank records. Individually, each issue raised concern. Together, they painted a troubling picture. The evidence suggested that a small group within the HOA leadership had gradually developed a system that benefited themselves while avoiding meaningful oversight. The most surprising part was how long the system had operated. Many residents assumed the problems began recently. The records told a different story. Some questionable practices stretched back years. The pattern was subtle enough to avoid attracting attention, but consistent enough to generate significant financial consequences over time. As investigators followed the trail, several former board members became increasingly cooperative. Some voluntarily provided information. Others supplied records they had preserved after leaving the HOA. A few admitted they had ignored warning signs because they assumed someone else would eventually address the issue. That assumption had allowed problems to grow. Now the consequences were catching up. Karen Whitmore found herself under mounting pressure. The confidence she displayed at the gas station weeks earlier had disappeared completely. Public support continued shrinking. Residents demanded transparency. Town officials demanded accountability. Former allies became distant. People who once praised her leadership suddenly avoided association with her. The isolation was impossible to ignore. Karen attempted to defend her actions through public statements and community meetings. She insisted she had acted in the neighborhood's best interests. She portrayed herself as a dedicated volunteer unfairly targeted by critics. Some residents believed portions of her explanation. Most did not. The growing body of evidence spoke louder than personal claims. Meanwhile, Marcus maintained the same professionalism that had defined his response from the very beginning. He never celebrated Karen's difficulties. He never used his position to embarrass anyone. His focus remained fixed on restoring trust in the community. That approach earned respect from residents across Cedar Ridge. People noticed the difference. For years, many had witnessed authority used as a weapon. Now they were witnessing authority used as a responsibility. The contrast mattered. As summer progressed, the investigation reached its conclusion. The findings were presented to town officials, legal counsel, and relevant oversight agencies. The report was extensive. Hundreds of pages documented financial irregularities, governance failures, conflicts of interest, and procedural violations. Not every allegation proved true. Several complaints lacked sufficient evidence. Others involved poor judgment rather than misconduct. However, enough verified issues existed to justify significant action. The results sent shockwaves through the community. Multiple contracts were terminated immediately. Several board members resigned. Financial recovery efforts began. New oversight procedures were implemented. Independent audits became mandatory. Election rules were revised. Transparency requirements expanded dramatically. For the first time in years, residents felt their concerns had been taken seriously. Community meetings that once generated frustration now generated participation. Homeowners who previously avoided involvement started attending regularly. People who had spent years feeling powerless discovered their voices mattered. The atmosphere within Cedar Ridge began changing. Not overnight, not perfectly, but noticeably. Trust slowly started returning. The transformation extended beyond HOA operations. The entire town seemed to learn something from the experience. Local officials reviewed policies. Community organizations improved accountability measures. Citizens became more engaged. People paid closer attention to decisions that affected their neighborhoods. The scandal exposed weaknesses. It also created opportunities for improvement. Several months after the gas station incident, Ridgeway Fuel and Market remained busy as ever. Customers came and went throughout the day. Employees focused on their work. Life moved forward. Many visitors still recognized Marcus Reed. Some knew him as the police chief. Others knew him as the station owner. Most knew him as the man whose calm response had triggered one of the most significant reforms Cedar Ridge had experienced in decades. Ironically, none of it would have happened without Karen's decision to call the police. What she intended as a display of authority became the event that exposed years of hidden problems. Her attempt to pressure a business owner had unintentionally invited scrutiny into her own actions. The lesson was impossible to miss. Power often creates a dangerous illusion. People who exercise authority for long enough sometimes begin believing they are immune from accountability. They mistake influence for invincibility. They assume rules apply differently to them. History repeatedly proves otherwise. Eventually, accountability arrives. Sometimes it comes through investigations. Sometimes through public scrutiny. Sometimes through unexpected circumstances. In Cedar Ridge, it arrived through a disagreement over free gasoline. The simplicity of that beginning made the outcome even more remarkable. Months later, residents still discussed the story. New homeowners heard it from neighbors. Longtime residents referenced it during community meetings. The details became part of local history, not because of the argument itself, not because of Karen's embarrassment, but because of what followed. The incident reminded people that fairness matters. Transparency matters. Integrity matters. Communities function best when authority serves residents rather than controlling them. One autumn evening, Marcus stood outside the gas station watching the sunset settle over Cedar Ridge. The neighborhood looked much like it had before. The same streets, the same homes, the same families. Yet something important had changed. People felt heard. They felt represented. They felt confident that rules would be applied fairly. That confidence was worth protecting. Marcus understood that no community would ever be perfect. Disagreements would continue. Challenges would emerge. New problems would eventually require solutions. That was simply part of life. But Cedar Ridge had learned an important lesson. No individual is above accountability. No position guarantees immunity. And sometimes the smallest conflict reveals the largest truth. The gas pumps stood quietly beneath the fading evening light. Customers continued filling their tanks. Children rode bicycles through nearby neighborhoods. Families gathered for dinner. Life moved forward. The controversy that once consumed the town had become a memory. A powerful memory, but a memory nonetheless. For Marcus Reed, the outcome represented something far greater than a successful investigation. It represented trust restored. For the residents of Cedar Ridge, it represented a fresh start. And for Karen Whitmore, it became a permanent reminder that respect cannot be demanded through authority, influence, or intimidation. It must be earned through character. The town moved forward stronger than before. The HOA became accountable. The community became united. And the police chief, who was once mistaken for an ordinary gas station owner, quietly returned to work, satisfied not because someone had lost power, but because an entire town had regained its voice. For more HOA drama, shocking Karen meltdowns, and satisfying justice stories, hit subscribe and join our growing community.